Welcome to Conversations for a Preferred Future. This is Jan Spencer coming to you from Eugene, Oregon. I'd like to introduce Marisha Auerbach. Um, I know Marisha through permaculture networks in the Northwest. She lives in Portland and just up the road, about 100 miles from my house. I've been to her place. It's a very nice permaculture property. Marisha is an internationally recognized permaculture educator, designer, and speaker, and she's lived and practiced permaculture in both urban and rural locations. She's an avid gardener and an herbalist and has a special focus on food production, ecology, and useful plants. She's serious about her botany. And Marisha believes it's possible to respond to the current environmental challenges and reduce our ecological footprints and to continue living delightful, uplifting, happy lives through permaculture design. So that is a lot of credits right there. And over the course of our conversation, you'll find out more about what Marisha is doing at her home and as a livelihood. She's got a lot going on. So, um, so okay, well, here we are, Marisha.
Hi,
First thing, yeah, welcome.
thanks for having me. It's good to
Yeah,
be here with all of you.
yeah, and I'm supposing that backdrop behind you is pretty local to you.
Yeah, that's my backyard in the summer. Right
Yeah,
now, it's not looking nearly as interesting, but it's still feeding us.
yeah,
But I
yeah,
thought this would be a bit more of a good eye candy for everybody.
yeah, yeah. You've got a great place. We'll find out a little bit more about that too. So, tell us a little bit about your background, just a little brief bio, and what motivates you.
Well,
Uh, Tell us a little bit about that.
all right. Well, I think that my enthusiasm for being able to work on positive futures and specifically permaculture is rooted in my ancestral history of being refugees. My grandparents were refugees during the Holocaust. They narrowly escaped the Germans, were Jewish. And so I lived, I grew up with them and was very influenced by them. And spent a lot of time as a youngster thinking about scapegoating. And I think that's the best part to start at right now, because this year has been the last, year has been particularly terrifying as I look at, the rise of white supremacy and the increased scapegoating that's going on. And as I, thought about that and was influenced by that history, I started learning about permaculture and ecological functions. And permaculture to me is a way that we can design our lives so that we can live within the inherent limits of our place by and be able to ground into where we live and figure out what our needs are and how we can meet our needs using our resources. And I think that once we're able to do that, then that can that influences the need to compete for resources, where we have secure resources that are being and our lives are built on biological resources that can increase exponentially. So I think that was my interest initially in permaculture. I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, and saw strip malls go in and forests come down, and things start to look like any town USA, and it lose its cultural identity while I was growing up. And so I decided to go to the Evergreen State College so that I could be in the forest and learn about intact ecological systems. And that's where I began to find out what permaculture was, starting with learning about organic gardening. And also, I've always been interested in places all over the world, different cultures and people. And so I studied some of that at Evergreen as well.
Just a sec, Marisha, just let's mention Evergreen State College is in Olympia, Washington, and has kind of a eco-green reputation.
Yeah, it's a great school. I did my first 2 years of undergrad at the University of Western Ontario in London, Ontario, Canada, and was restricted by the grades and exams that traditional school is focused on. And Evergreen has no grades, no required courses, no majors, but it is very good at helping people think deeply about situations and social situations, ecological situations. And so that was very nurturing for me as I arrived as a transfer student there.
Okay, that's great. We're going to show a picture here, and I am going to ask Marisha to explain what we're looking at. Can you see this pointer right here?
Yes.
Okay, what's this right here? Tell us what this is.
That's my backyard. So let me just get everyone up to this moment here. I'll do it quickly. So
Okay,
just so it feels synchronicity, so it feels like it's connected. Out of Evergreen, I found the Wild Time Farm in Southwest Washington. I studied permaculture there. I was an intern there for a year, and then I became the caretaker there. I lived in the greater Olympia area for a number of years. I was at the farm for about 4 years practicing permaculture, and then I started teaching. I spent some time when I didn't have a house because my teaching schedule was so intensive that I was traveling more than being at home. So I stayed at various communities during that time. And then I moved back to Wild Time and spent another couple of years there. And while I was in between those times at Wild Time Farm, I had a city lot in Southwest Olympia, and I decided that I wanted to be happy with my garden and stop opening the refrigerator to find food or going to the supermarket to find food. And so I practiced for about 3 years, only eating the things out of my yard and trying to maximize food production at this rental place. And after that, I developed a slideshow called How to Grow All Your Own Produce in 2.5 years, because that was about how long it took for me to be able to meet my food needs on this in this rental property in Olympia. That was when my teaching schedule picked up. And after, when it was time for me to leave Wild Time the second time, it was because I decided to move to the city because I wanted to show how one could apply permaculture design on an urban lot and be able to generate as much food as they could on an urban lot, as well as to retrofit their home for ecological function, energy efficiency, and all those things. So I hope that gave people a bit of a catch up to this moment. Many people were saying, as I took that slideshow around, they're saying, wow, that's really great that you can grow all your own food, but I live in the city. How can I do that on a city lot? And the dimensions of a city lot was initially intended for people to be able to produce for their own needs for a household on a city lot. So that's usually 50 by 100 feet. So what we're looking at now is an aerial image of my current place where I've lived for the past 10 years in the Woodstock neighborhood in Southeast Portland. And it is about a 6,500 square foot lot. Jan just outlined the lot line. North is actually pointing down, which is against international standard, but just to be able to orientate you to where our solar access comes from. This house was a foreclosure and it has a flat roof. And we were able to move into this nice neighborhood with this house with a pretty good solar exposure about 10 years ago. And in the first year, we took out the lawn and put in a garden, and we've been eating out of it ever since. So it took about, I'd say this year, I think Zane and I, my partner Zane, would agree that we were able to provide most of our vegetable needs within the first year. We have about 22 fruit trees on this city lot, as well as numerous berry bushes. And, you know, I collect all sorts of useful plants. So we have just about everything I can collect, and it's kind of bursting with biological activity. And we've also been avid gleaners with the Portland Fruit Tree Project to be able to supplement our fruit needs while our trees get larger.
Sure, that's impressive. And once again, this is a rooftop garden right here. Just mention this, you know, A lot of people sort of idealize a rooftop garden, turning rooftops into food production. What's been, just briefly, your experience with that? How much effort did it take to actually do this on your roof, Marisha, and was it worth all the effort?
Well, let's just start out by saying, as Zane likes to say, it's like having a swimming pool on your roof that you can't swim in. So a flat roof in Oregon is not an ideal design. I don't know why the architect decided to do this, but this is what we inherited. And the reason that Zane decided to put the green roof on the house was because primarily because we were shoring up the house for to be more prepared for earthquakes. So we share during the retrofit process, the entire house was encased in plywood. We bolted the house down to the foundation. And after doing all that structural work, our roof needed to be replaced. And so we had a number of options, and he decided that he wanted to try this out.
Sure. I've been up on the roof, and of course, in the summertime, you have a little black bunny that lives up there on the roof. It's
Sometimes we do. We don't right now. Yeah, a male bunny can live on the roof because the males don't dig as much, and bunnies really like having a nice view. We don't bring the females up on the roof because they do a lot of digging. They really like to burrow.
yeah, this is actually quite a roof. You already kind of touched on this. There's a term that I'm very fond of. It's called home economics. And what that means is producing, what can we produce at home? You know, there's food, there's energy, there's water. Tell us a little bit about your home economics. You produce a good deal of food. Maybe tell us a little bit more of, you have some food for us. It's not all tomatoes and cucumbers. You know, you've got probably
No,
quite a variety of very well thought out kinds of plants that you have there. Go into a little bit more detail on home economics, Marisha.
okay, well, we can start with the food system, although that might be the thing that takes the longest to talk about. We grow about 85% of our food on this city lot. We want to have fresh food year round, and so we always have a diverse diet of fresh things to eat. Not, we're growing anything from like you said, lettuce and tomatoes to some more obscure stuff like lovage or the Andean tubers or like yacon, mashua, oca. I've worked with Eric Tonesmeyer on the update for the perennial vegetables book. And so I tend to collect a lot of perennial vegetables. So I have a pretty good, selection of that throughout the year. I'm always trying to push the envelope with what our climate can do. So I do have a citrus tree that's outside in our climate. It's a yuzu. That's a citrus tree from Japan. So we have, our fruit starts in May with the strawberries and the honeyberries, and it ends in November with the quince and the persimmons, but it doesn't really end then. At that point, we are going into things that have been frozen or that we've preserved. So we always have fruit to eat. Um, I make my own herbal products. And so I have, a whole apothecary, both for myself as well as to share with friends. I make wine, I make cider, I do cordials, just about anything that you can grow. The thing I like to think about is if we can all be in agreement that all energy comes from the sun, right? Like fossil fuels is stored solar energy, wind energy comes from the sun heating the earth, and that and wind results from that. So if all energy comes from the sun, then the only way to truly be sustainable is to be able to create a yield by catching sun on those little solar panels that we call leaves, and to be able to store that to create what we can call wealth. So I'm an avid seed saver. I think seeds are the true wealth. And I'm all about propagating plants and sharing those with other people. So that's why you'll always see this multi-layered system where I'm just trying to catch as much sun and throughout the year as I can. So another thing to say about our food system is, I never really hoped to have to put it to the test, but as COVID hit, we did finally, where we've probably gone to the co-op to get to get some staples, maybe about 5 times since March, since the pandemic hit. So I'm really glad that I can say that, yes, we are growing most of our own food on our city lot. There are a few things that I get once a week. I'm a part of a milk share, so I'm glad to get some local half and half from a farmer and some yogurt. And I do have a friend who's been working on the grain shed here in the Willamette Valley. And so she'll come by when I need flour or barley. But otherwise, we grow corn as far as a grain crop. And we grow most of, everything we possibly can, as well as we have chickens and rabbits and ducks to help supplement with some of that. And then as far as like home economics, it's worth mentioning energy efficiency. Just how little energy, how much money, how can we reduce our need to spend money on other things? So by having, Zane used to work for the power company in Illinois. So he's really great with home energy systems and energy efficiency. He took great care in insulating our home, and he's insulated the walls, the roof, the floor, the windows. And then we have simple things like, if I'm going to take a shower, I turn on the hot water heater. It's on a switch. It's super efficient. So I turn it on about a half hour before I take a shower, and I turn it off when I'm done. So just certain simple little things so that we don't end up wasting energy. And then we have, after you're done practicing conservation, once you know how much energy you need, then the next step is to generate. And so we have 7 solar panels on our roof, and so our energy bills are very small. We also have a 3,000-gallon rainwater catchment cistern to supplement our city water. Zane does a lot of things by bike. This is us with the bike fruit tree harvest.
Sure, this is an awesomely beautiful photograph right here of you and Zane. Certainly, reducing our ecological footprints extends off the property as well, and moving things around like this on a bicycle is really impressive. There's just so many different ways that we can reduce our ecological footprints. And you mentioned something that I really want to underline is I think it's safe to say that Marisha has a well-established priority system for what you and Zane spend money on. Probably instead of rather not so productive purchases, you invest in your property, you invest in this kind of bike gear, you invest in the kinds of systems that help you reduce your ecological footprint and to produce more of your needs closer to home. That's a huge issue, is what do we spend our time and money doing? And I think that's a great example. You're a great example of that.
Well, let me say one more thing, a few more things about this picture, just to point some things out for people. So the trailer that I'm hauling is actually, there's 2 orchard ladders with a bunch of fruit pickers on top of those. And the axle comes off. So we can remove that when we are not using it as a trailer, so that we can use these orchard ladders to harvest the neighborhood fruit trees. And all of those bins that you see on Zane's trailer are actually all filled with persimmons. And so we divide those up where half of the fruit that we harvest goes to the local food bank, and the other half is distributed amongst our volunteers. And we've been really fortunate to have a tremendous collection of people that work with us. And it just feels like such a tremendous gift to have all these, what a great community we have.
Yeah, I think we want to get a little bit more into community activities. We want to hear a little bit more about that because as I've said a number of times in regard to my own property, which is a pretty well-developed quarter-acre suburban permaculture site, it's great to have this going on your own, but for us to see the preferred future, we've got to go way beyond our own property. It has to be our neighbors up the street, down the street, all over the place. And we want to get maybe a little bit more into that in a moment. Just let me do a quick little item I should have mentioned earlier. Please use your chat. You can chat and ask a question of Marisha for when we finish with this, we can have some chat and follow up after we actually do the conversation. And I'd be way glad to hear where you're from. I'm very geographical. So if you chat and all you want to say is, I'm chatting from Las Cruces, New Mexico, that's fine. If you want to be on my email list and get updates on these educational projects, please chat me your email address as well, so that I can keep you posted on what's going on. So yeah, this is just, it warms my heart to see people doing bicycles and more human power, because this is a major part of home economics right here. A lot of people have, when they write an email, they have some kind of phrase or some kind of wisdom at the bottom of the email that goes out with the email. And Marisha has something like that. It goes something like, the greatest change we need to make is from consumption to production. That's a major political and economic comment. Marisha, can you just give us a little bit more of a thought on that, politically and economically, a little bit of a larger scope on this?
Yeah, well, I think COVID had a lot of us realize how much safer it is and more reliable it is when we're able to produce for what we need. There's a lot of hidden costs within things that we consume, whether that is, as simple as just the different hands that hold the thing, or people being in unsafe work conditions that don't put their health as a top priority, to the destruction that we might be inadvertently causing in other communities by being a part of the global food system and not realizing that the that the coffee we're consuming needs to be grown in a shade grown situation for songbirds. I spent a lot of time working with a Maya community in Belize, so I know coffee growing and cacao growing pretty intimately, and am fortunate to be aware of the tropical things that people grow that we like to consume. And if I want to have those, then I usually am fortunate enough to be able to go direct with that.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. It reminds me of one of the presentations that I did in my 7-part series, is specifically about what Marisha was referring to, external costs. The price we pay for almost anything we buy doesn't cover all the damage. And it's not just the environmental damage, it's the social and cultural public health damage as well. So that's a
Yeah, I think we saw a lot of that during this whole situation with COVID. As you may imagine, I was quite dismayed at the mason jar shortage this summer during canning season. I never really realized how much of a mason jar hoarder I am and how much I'm dependent on that for my food system. But one thing that was pointed out as that some of the materials that are used for making these things are reaching peak, and that's why we're not going to see the same global production system as we've been used to. When mason jars come back online, they're expected to cost 3 times as much as they have been costing. And I think it's important for us to look at things and to really see the true value in them so that we treat them with respect.
Yeah, I agree completely with that. We live in kind of a throwaway culture, and when things cost so remarkably little, it's easy to lose that sort of respect. Marisha, are you? Yeah, okay. You kind of froze up there for a second. Are you there?
Yeah, I noticed that. I'm seeing about closing some windows here.
Yeah, okay. Okay, yeah. So what let's do now is do another little screen share. So this next kind of little topic area that I'd like to explore with Marisha is livelihood. You not only produce a good deal of your own needs there on site, but this is kind of your livelihood too. You've got Uh, you got a plant nursery, you teach classes, you have an involvement, permaculture rising, you teach courses through Oregon State University. So tell us a little bit about this is fascinating. You have a whole livelihood that you're making a living doing good stuff. Tell us some more about that.
Yeah, well, my primary work is I teach permaculture online through the Oregon State University. We have a pretty fantastic teaching team. We offer the permaculture design course. We offer an advanced course in climate resilience. And I just developed a new course that launched in 2020, and that's the permaculture food forest online course. So that's been really exciting to me. I think food forests are the best way that we can respond to some of the future challenges that we face, climate change among others. And we can have a lot of fun growing food in community as well as enhancing ecological functions. I also, as I mentioned earlier, I love collecting plants and I love sharing plants with others. And so I've kind of always had a nursery. I think the first iteration of my nursery was in 1998 when I lived at the Wild Time Farm. And my mentor, Kirk Hansen, said, well, this is what you do. You just dig up the plants that volunteer in your pathway, and then you put them in a pot and you sell them at the farmer's market. So that's kind of been my business plan ever since. But it's been really great when I moved to Portland because I have access to such an incredible market. And by the time I moved to Portland, I had become quite established as a teacher. And people know me for that, being able to grow my own food year round and know that I have an eye on specific varieties of things that will make sure that we, have food throughout the year. So I started the Grow Your Own Produce workshop series, and we meet one Wednesday a month from February through November so that people can get bite-sized chunks about what to do in the garden, just 1 month at a time, what to do to be able to maximize food production. So the next class is live right now. We start on February 3rd, and it's going to be on Zoom this year. So I'm glad that I can offer that sort of support for gardeners in our entire bioregion throughout the Pacific Northwest. From there, a friend of mine wanted to collaborate on a nursery. And so we started out selling vegetable starts in Portland, along with the perennials that I've always had. And at some point we separated. And so her business is now Little Starts, which is up in North Portland. It was mostly a geographic reason why we don't do the business together anymore. And I continue to have a vegetable starts nursery as well as other things. Jan, could you keep that picture back up? I'm getting there. I'm real close.
Okay.
Okay, so my nursery offers different plant packages so people can get one flat of vegetable starts every month from April through September so that they don't have to really think about variety selection. I do that for you, and you can get a year-round harvest planned out through joining my vegetable starts CSA. We usually just do plant sales off the driveway so that people can come and see our yard and say, wow, these grapes are delicious. I think I'd like to plant that variety, or I think that flower is so beautiful. I want one of those. So they can really see what they're getting. It's always interesting when people say, is this appropriate for us to plant now? And I don't really understand why anyone would sell anything that you couldn't plant when you bought it. Everything is appropriate for our climate and ready to go in the ground when I have it available. So, but just for fun, one time every summer, we tend to put the plants on the bike trailers and bring them to the Woodstock Farmers Market. So that's the picture you're looking at right now. We prop up the bike trailer on sawhorses and we sell it just like that. There's a lot of work that goes into bringing stuff to market and setting up, and also a lot of disappointment if you don't sell everything and have to bring it home. So by doing it by bike and just putting them on the trailer and doing only our neighborhood farmers market, this is how we make it more efficient. And one of the things about this picture here that made me smile when you put it up there is two collaborators of mine are in the picture. So to the right of me is one of my students from Portland Community College, Sav. That would be the other side, the person with the bandana in their hair. Yeah, that's Sav. And Sav is also an avid cyclist. and helped quite a bit volunteering in the nursery. And then there's a beautiful woman on the left, my good friend Temi, who's from Nigeria. She was in Portland as an agroforestry fellow at the World Forestry Center. And as soon as I met her, we became fast friends, and it was just delightful to spend the summer with Temi. She basically showed up for just about everything I was doing. I think she rode a bike for, she hadn't ridden a bike many times when she rode the bike with us to the farmer's market to help out at this event. So it's just delightful to have people join in, and it's particularly delightful when I can learn about other cultures by having this, by having my life be attractive to those people.
Yeah, you've touched a lot of people. I wanted to also show this other image that is relevant to what you're just talking about too. This one here, Marisha's Plant Nursery.
Yeah, that's a screen grab from my website. So yeah, we just called it Marisha's Permaculture Plant Nursery because it's not my primary occupation. I sometimes think about it as just my therapy. And when I was trying to come up with a name for it, it was like, well, what's everyone going to search to find it? So while it's kind of a mouthful, Marisha's Permaculture Plant Nursery is the name it's been going by. And this year, I am so excited that my nursery is expanding. I have 2 people that I'm going to be mentoring for growing the vegetable starts. So big shout out to Kim and Monica for that. And my dear friends at the Wild Time Farm are joining in with me this year too. And John Henriksen and Susie Martins. So we're able to expand the nursery and to do this in community. My good friend Tara has been really helpful with the website. And so I'm thinking that before too long, my nursery is going to need to turn into a cooperative and have a different name that we all decide on. But for right now, it's been this little baby that I've been tending to. And soon it's going to be able to get bigger and have more interactions with other people stewarding the business.
Yeah, that's great. A cooperative business would be just wonderful, and that gives you a wider reach out into the community. I want to get kind of back into a little bit more of the community stuff shortly, but yeah, so let me move from there. What I'd like to move into now is community involvements. This is a great issue here, a great topic here. And I've got a picture here that's probably one of many community involvements, but it is well, that ought to be.
Hey, while you find that, should I answer a question or something on the chat here?
Okay, here we go.
All right.
Here we go. So this is certainly looking like some kind of a seed swap, but let's use this as kind of a point of departure. Portland, of course, has, at least among some networks and subcultures, a pretty good reputation. You know, their city repair comes from Portland. There's the Cully neighborhood and there's a number of retrofit eco villages like Kailash, which is just a few blocks from where you live. There's lots of interesting stuff going on in Portland. So maybe if you could just start with this picture here and just give us a little bit of an idea, Marisha, of your networks and the different people you're involved with, and comment perhaps on some of the really positive activities you know of going on in Portland.
Okay. Well, of course, it's worthwhile to acknowledge that this is a seed exchange that happened pre-COVID. Myself and my team usually offer a seed exchange every January in honor of World Seed Saving Day. And one of our team members is on the call right now. So a big shout out to Lori Bennett. She's on the left side of the picture there with the blue pants on. Yep, right there. That's Lori. And Lori joined us as an avid seed saver from, she had come up from California. I started saving seeds quite a while ago and have been maintaining my own seed exchange because I was tired of people saying that they didn't have any money to have a garden. You know, when you think about the exponential potential of one seed, you know, you just plant one seed and all the seed that you can collect from the prodigy of that plant, then it really sinks in that money should not be something that prevents someone from gardening. So I maintained my own seed exchange for a number of years. And when I moved to Portland, myself and Lori and other people on our team, I see Riddy DeCruz in that picture and Bernhard Masterson. We have a team of about 15 people that host the seed exchange annually at People's Food Co-op. And we are avid supporters of People's Food Co-op. They've been tremendous with their COVID protocol and everything during this hard time. So I want to give a big shout out to them as well. If you're in Portland, please support People's Food Co-op. And let's see, what else do we say there? We do a lot of things at People's Food Co-op. I also offer the seed exchange with my team at the Oregon Country Fair. When that returns again, we're in Energy Park, and the Oregon Country Fair is a phenomenal community gathering as well. But yes, I've been involved with the City Repair Project. That's actually initially why I moved to Portland, is because of my involvement with City Repair. When it was time for me to leave the beautiful 150 acres of the Wildtime Farm, I knew I needed to move to the city to get more professional experience. And so I was looking at Seattle or Portland, and I chose to come here mostly from all the involvement with Mark Lakeman, my good friend, who's the founder of the City Repair Project.
Marisha, just take a little short tangent. Tell us what City Repair is.
City Repair is an organization that's mission is to turn spaces into places. So City Repair is all about creating places where people can connect with each other in their neighborhood that reflect the cultural identity of that neighborhood. So, you know, it's all too common where a developer comes in and or we have chain stores that come in and the cultural character of a place is lost and replaced with quick housing or chain stores. So City Repair is all about bringing the neighborhood together to be able to decide what they need in their neighborhood to help people connect, whether that's the tiny libraries that people see all over this country now. That was begun by City Repair. Or whether it's a cob bench to sit on or a painted intersection to slow traffic. These are different things that go on through the City Repair Project. And the City Repair Project, historically, of course, not during COVID, has offered the Village Building Convergence, which is 10 days of natural building and permaculture in Portland, where there's various community sites that are sponsoring projects where people can volunteer and help them make that bench or cob oven or paint the intersection, whatever it is that's going to connect people more deeply with that community. And then in the evenings, we have speakers and a shared dinner. And so that's actually where I met my partner, Zane. It's where I've met many of my dear friends. And it's a tremendous opportunity here in Portland for meeting other like-minded people and being able to engage in the neighborhood fabric of this place.
Yeah, and of course, City Repair is not at this point unique to Portland. Lots of cities. I think there's a smaller village building convergence in Olympia and probably some other locations. You don't need to reinvent the wheel, you know, and there's these intersection repair projects, here and there all over the country. So City Repair certainly is one of my favorite organizations. It's more about reclaiming urban space for people. And I really resonate with that. So do you have much interaction with Kailash Eco Village?
Yeah. Zane more so than me. Zane goes down there every Saturday to help with the food preparation for Food Not Bombs.
Yeah, well, just give us a little description of Kailash Eco Village. That's one of my favorite places anywhere.
Yeah. Well, an eco village is a community that is founded based on ecological principles. And so there's different types of eco villages here in Portland and around the world. Some have more people that own their homes, like Columbia Eco Village in Portland, which is actually where Lori Bennett lives. They have some rentals, but it's more people that own their homes. And one of the unique things about Kailash Eco Village is that it's primarily a rental eco village. So Ole, Arison, and Maitri are the owners of the Eco Village and the stewards of the place. It's got vegan principles. So they ask people to always cook vegan in the vegan kitchen, community kitchen. They don't use animal products in the garden. They encourage human manure and urine for diluting urine for fertilizers. They have a huge garden. They're growing so much food, and people who live there can have their own personal plot. And there's community work parties there. So for the community plots, they have fruit trees. They have beautiful spaces for people to gather. Um, and then they also host quite a number of things with Food Not Bombs, the cooking for Food Not Bombs happening every Saturday. And then the team that cooks for Food Not Bombs, they have a high ethic as far as not using cars. They transport all the food to the park where they do the serving by bike.
Yeah, I've been over to Kailash a number of times and did an interview with Ole Erson one time for my radio show. And another just they're so integrated with the neighborhood. You know, they have different participations with the neighborhood, like emergency preparedness and the neighborhood association. They actually have a painted intersection right next to Kailash Eco Village. So it's an old apartment complex that back in the I think it was around the turn of the century, which sounds kind of long ago, but it's not so long ago. There used to be drug shootouts. And Ole told me that when they bought the place, about a fourth of the apartments were unusable because they hadn't been used and they were all run down. So the whole idea of taking something that's already there and repairing it and repurposing it into an eco village like that is it's off the charts as far as I'm concerned. They have a website, Kailash Eco Village, and also City Repair has a website. You can find out more. They both have lots and lots of documentation.
Another thing that's remarkable about Kailash Eco Village is that they had a tremendous amount of concrete that they've depaved to be able to put in the garden. So they've done a lot of restoration in that way.
Yeah, and they document all that. There's before and after pictures of everything. And where they used to have like 30 cars parking is just this beautiful mandala garden now. So it's just a small little preview of what could be if people really wanted to make these kind of changes and they prioritized their time and money and helped make these things kind of happen where they live. It's awesome. So Marisha, any other items about your community involvements? Boy, you got a lot. She's got a lot going.
Um, I'm kind of spread out throughout the bioregion in some ways. Part of me still is involved with the communities that I've been in Olympia where I used to live. So that's one thing about me personally is that once I get involved with the group, it's hard to not be involved anymore. They take a piece of my heart. So big shout out to Fertile Ground Community Center in Olympia. I'm very familiar with the Olympia Village Building Convergence because that's where it happens at Fertile Ground Community Center. And so that's another major community involvement for me.
Yeah. Yeah. So I know Marisha through Northwest Permaculture Convergences. That's kind of another larger sort of network here in the Northwest. I see Julie Wolf there looking up into the ceiling right now. And that's where I know her also. Just connections, networks, and sharing what we're learning. Let's just pivot a little bit here, Marisha, because we're coming up on almost an hour here. We're not in a big hurry. What I'd like to ask you is a question. Say that somebody is kind of looking at the world as we know it. You know, we've got climate change, we've got unbelievable social, political, economic disequity. We have, we can cheer for the new president, and to a degree, I do too, but we're way over the, you mentioned earlier, Marisha, natural boundaries. We've got to live within the boundaries of the natural world, and we are not even remotely. And it's not just the 1% in this country, it's more like the 95% or way overextended ecologically. So say somebody's watching this and they say, ask you, Marisha, I'm kind of new at this. I'm kind of concerned. I think I need to make some changes. What would be kind of your advice if somebody asked you, how can I live more ecologically? Where do I start? And what are some of the first things I need to do to reduce my ecological footprint, and then also increase my social involvement, my political, economic involvement with creating a more preferred future?
Well, I may be a little biased being biologically oriented, but I think that starting a garden is just one of the easiest things to do. You know, you can just start a garden in a container if you don't have any soil, or you can find someone if you don't have land to work with that you want to collaborate with. But once you start a garden, you have a whole community of people that you end up having things to talk about with. And from there, you can learn so much more about land stewardship. So I think that that's the easiest thing to start with. And I do want to say that I'm addressing this question a bit on my talk on Saturday with the Global Peace Tribe. They do an event called Saturday Night Alive. It's a variety show. And I'll be on for a bit this Saturday, because we are in the middle of a global catastrophe. I don't know how it hasn't been as pronounced for people to understand that COVID is a zoonotic disease. I mean, that's how that's posted on the UN's website. And a zoonotic disease means that it's caused by the loss of wildlife habitat. And so climate scientists for years have been predicting that we were going to have pandemics as we reach crisis state. And now we're in the first of the global pandemics, but it's not the first zoonotic disease. We've seen an increase in zoonotic diseases over the last couple years. So whether we get vaccinated or not against COVID, I think that we're only going to be free of these pandemic situations once we're able to restore wildlife habitat so that animals have proper buffers and have enough space for them to live healthy lives. You know, it's time that our consumption patterns stop dominating the world, the world's ecosystems. So while I can easily say growing a garden is the first thing that I would do for someone who wanted to get involved, there are so many different ways that we can practice living lighter on this planet. And so actually, when someone asks me that question, I usually change my answer based on the affinities of that person that I'm talking to. We all have different things that fill our hearts with joy, and different talents and skills that we can contribute. And so I think we all just need to look through those glasses of seeing how can we participate and show how we can, power down and be able to live equally delightful lives while really caring for this planet that nurtures us.
Yeah. When the topic is of this particular question, a contribution I would make if I didn't hear somebody else mention it, and I mentioned this a number of times during my 7-part series, in terms of becoming involved in the community. Lots of cities have neighborhood programs, and that means neighborhood associations, which almost all the time embrace people to become involved. Typically, a neighborhood association might meet once a month. They address the issues of the neighborhood. It might be crime, it might be pollution, it might be homelessness, it could be anything. The people involved with the neighborhood association create the agenda. If you're a part of it, you help create the agenda. And I know here in my neighborhood, part of our agenda in our neighborhood association is resilience and permaculture. And the neighborhood association has a platform in the community that most people don't have on their own. It lends a legitimacy to these kinds of ideas that Marisha is talking about, and probably these kinds of ideas everybody here is interested in. But I would strongly recommend, if people want to become involved in their communities, to check and see if your city has a neighborhood program, because it's custom made for putting this kind of information out to a wider audience.
Yeah, and Bill Mollison, one of the things that Bill Mollison, the founder of permaculture, would say is the first order of business is to get our own house in order and then to go from there. And the neighborhood association involvement is a perfect example of, building that resilience where we live in our homes and then being able to radiate out from that place.
Yeah, absolutely. So one more question. Let's maybe kind of finish with this. This has been awesome, Marisha. This has just been so good.
Thank you.
You have a motivation. Motivation can sort of help cultivate something of a vision. Give us a little bit of an idea of how you might, I wouldn't necessarily say what you predict for the future, but when you think about how what you're doing can add to a larger movement, how would you, in a hopeful kind of a way, see where this movement, along with Kailash Eco Village and the village building convergence, city repair, your seed swap, you've got a lot going there already. How do you see that growing? How do you see that evolving?
Well, I'd like to, I'm, into doing everything I can to encourage people to just come home, to inhabit your place on earth, through bioregional awareness, whether that's, knowing the native plants that are in your area, the native medicinals, the native birds, knowing your food chains, as far as like, how the different animals, native animals in our ecosystems are created, to be able to know our wheel of the year, as far as like eating seasonally. If you're not growing that food, supporting local farmers, if there's things that you have in your life that you don't know where they're coming from, or you don't know the hidden costs, to try to think about, how can we support people that are local in our community so that we can get rid of these hidden costs and be able to really see what the ecological footprint is of the things that we have in our lives so that we can truly restore this planet.
Right. And I just can't help but make the comment about the ecological footprint, the hidden costs. Personally, I see no future in continuing with with capitalism and the consumer culture, because it is just the opposite of practically everything that I know that I would like to see. It ain't gonna happen with capitalism, and that doesn't to suggest turning this into a Soviet republic or something. That doesn't work either. But permaculture really provides a lot to work with, not only in terms of designing your property, but values, ideals, the wisdom of the world's great spiritual traditions is something I also like to refer to as well. Faith communities ought to be stepping up big time, to take a lead in doing this kind of work. So this conversation could go on for a long, long time, but and once again, we do want to have some chat, some conversation after we actually finish with just me and Marisha. We can have other voices and other comments as well. So anything for final thoughts, Marisha?
Yeah, I want to just add on one more thing. It's been really disappointing to see the divisiveness in this country over the last number of years, the us versus them, or, you know, where people are so polarized, you know, and I feel like we are lacking some communication skills where words like capitalism or communism or socialism become triggers rather than, you know, looking at the concepts beneath them. And so I just want to piggyback on what you said about permaculture and say that, you know, when David Holmgren and Bill Mollison set out to develop the permaculture concept, you know, which was really just an accumulation of things that they've learned from studying indigenous cultures all over the world, because indigenous cultures who have that connection with place, you know, tend to have a higher ecological ethic. So I just want to acknowledge that, you know, permaculture is really just a modern concept that, you know, has taken things from so many other places in the world. And when Mollison and Holmgren developed this concept, they began with the permaculture ethics and principles, and the ethics were developed as to begin the conversation. What are 3 things that all people can agree on so we can start talking about our shared future? And so while I've been disappointed with seeing the divisiveness in our country, what always comes back for me is like, how can we hold in our hearts a way of having a conversation with anybody so that we can share about our concerns for the future and be able to, you know, hold their concerns as well. How can we find common ground? Because that's really, you know, the way that we need to get out of this mess.
Yeah, and it's occurred to me just in the same way that you're describing there, Marisha. I bet there's more in common between those people who kind of went on the rampage at the Capitol building a couple of weeks ago. I wish they'd find out about permaculture, because they're being persecuted and maligned by the same system that we are, but without feeling or thinking that we're somehow better. But at least we have what seems to me a system for channeling our energy, I think, in a more positive way than going on the rampage. Wow, if anybody knows any of the people who the militias and the Proud Boys and the 3%ers and all of that, turn them on to permaculture. You know, put that energy in a positive direction. That's what I would suggest. Okay, final thought.
I'm excited to get into some of these questions.
Okay.
We have a lot of people engaging here, and I want to make sure that we can fit this in.
Okay. All right. Okay. So Joshua, if you would turn off the recording, then that's exactly